So, you know how I said in the last video. So, I was just working on my new video where I ranked all of the Helluva Boss Season 1 episodes from worst to the best. Well, I pretty much procrastinated to the point where we are now 3 months later and I still didn't even started recording. So, yeah, if you're asking why it took so long, I'm not going to lie to you. If you never heard about Helluva Boss, it is basically a spin-off show of Has-Been Hotel. If you never heard of Has-Been Hotel, this show basically takes place in hell, where Imp Blitz made a business of assassinating people in the living world, to which they can travel thanks to Stolas, a very powerful demon he managed to seduce. There is also a married couple, Millie and Moxie, that work with Blitz, as well as his pet/adopted daughter, Hellhound Luna. If you haven't seen the show and you mind spoilers, then firstly, why exactly did you click on this video? And secondly, you can just go to this timestamp for no spoiler rating of the whole season 1. And by the way, I know that there are 7 episodes of season 2 already out, but I don't like giving my full thoughts on unfinished products since, for example, the Has-Been Hotel review I did is already pretty much outdated because 4 more episodes came out. So I will probably do season 2 ranking one day, but only after all 12 announced episodes are already out. But I think I stalled for long enough, let's get to ranking.
When you want somebody gone and you don't want to wait too long, call the immediate murder professionals.
So this is where it all started. Although I have the utmost respect for the team that managed to create a series, I think that the pilot episode is actually kind of really bad. I mean, I like some aspects of it, for instance humor.
Sorry, I fucked your husband.
I normally laugh out loud only when I'm with people, but when I rewatched pilot, I was alone. So this episode is certified funny. Also, this kind of applies to every single episode going forward, but Brandon Rogers is absolutely the perfect voice for Blitz, and you can really feel Rogers' sense of humor blend into his character, giving show so much of his personality. I don't know how much creative liberty he has been given, but if it's not written by him, it is definitely at least written with him in mind. But when it comes to non-Blitz related great things about this episode, I also really like both songs. Although Oh Millie is technically not fully in this episode, but it is a bob, so I want to mention it. I also really like small details in the IMP office, like don't eat my lunch written on the fridge while Luna is eating Moxie's lunch, or Luna watching Charlie on her computer. These are just so adorable little details that make this so much more rewatchable. If you are asking,
well, why is this on the bottom of the list then?
These are sadly just the minor details compared to actual problems I have with this episode. First of all of it has basically zero plot. Main characters are simply just sitting in a room discussing their company, which is not automatically a bad concept for a pilot that is supposed to introduce the concept to viewer, but the ways in what this episode does this are kind of questionable. Like, Moxie is talking about why they cannot afford billboard, then Blitz plays video of them killing people that has nothing to do with the rest of the scene. Then a different video plays where Blitz explains the point of their company, then it turns into a jingle where Moxie shoots a child. Suddenly the episode is about them taking this human child to human hospital, except psych, because Blitz doesn't know what an insurance is, and then it turns out this all was just a flashback and we get back to the conference room and everyone carries the conversation like normal. Although I admit that when it later turns out that Kid was in the room with them the whole time, that was actually kind of funny. But this is not even the only confusing part. For example, later, Blitz has flashback on Stolas calling him, which leads to another flashback of him effing Stolas, from which we then return back to the first flashback layer, from which we later return to present, and none of these time changes are communicated to the audience. So my first watching, I had absolutely zero idea what the fuck was happening. Also, this is not really a problem I have with this episode, but IMP was literally on human news and no one cared, which is kind of weird considering a lot of different episodes where the entire plot was about them not being able to let people discover them. But I digress. 4 out of 10. Moving on.
I feel like I went a little too hard with the confetti this time though. I have like a rainbow in my vagina right now.
And we got from the very first episode to the very last one. I would not call Queen Bee episode bad, but I definitely wouldn't say it's good either, since there is not much bad I can say about this episode, but also not much good either. This episode takes place right after the 7th one, named Aussies, about which we will talk later, but what is important to understand now is that during this episode, Blitz is in understandably bad mind space after pretty much fucking up things with Stolas. As far as the plot goes, Luna gets invited to a party organized by her friend and not so subtle crush, Vortex, and his girlfriend, Luna so far does not know is one of deadly sins, Beelzebub. What I really like about this episode is the song sung by no one else than Kesha. The singer I honestly don't really care that much about, but the song is really great, and since Ivzy Pop's career kind of started with unofficially animated one of her songs, Die Young, Kesha voicing one of the characters in her show is just so cool. The other great thing about this episode I want to mention is the ending, when Blitz drunkenly talks to Luna and her, despite not really understanding what is he talking about, comforts him and takes care of him, which is really sweet scene I really like. But now to the bad stuff. Despite the fact that this episode was so delayed, I mean, it dropped literally after a few season 2 episodes already aired, it just seems weirdly rushed to me. For example, near the beginning, there are these dog girls that are talking shit about Luna and get very offended when she talks back. Do you think they will have something to do with the episode? Well, we never see them again. When Luna wants to leave, this wolf talks her out of it by flirting with her. Surely he will be important. Nope, this is his first and last spoken line in the episode and show so far. Do you see what I mean? It just has so much really underdeveloped aspects that make me feel like this episode was supposed to be something completely else, but it got cut just to be done with it. When I was editing this, I noticed that in this scene, they literally forgot to add Luna's line. Also, I actually really hated Luna during this episode. Like, she fully goes there with intention to get with Vortex, knowing well that he has a girlfriend, and then gets butthurt when she realizes she has no chance to compete with her. And yes, she knows he has a girlfriend, since he told her back at the spring break. She just doesn't know it's being. And if you are willing to look past these issues, this episode is not even a good finale to the season. And yes, this is the season finale. This is the last episode of the season and it just doesn't have anything to do with themes of the season, being mostly about Blitz pushing away people in his life that care about him. Maybe you could make an argument for the second half when Blitz actually shows up, but it is not like even then the episode doesn't raise any points that wasn't already explored in the previous episode. Which, by the way, did Blitz really meet Asmodeus within a few hours of meeting Beelzebub? Like, I mean, it's not really a bad thing about the episode, but it also makes me feel like deadly sins are way less exciting than I thought. If one of the lowest classes in hell can just, not even on purpose mind you, but accidentally, randomly meet 2 out of 7 deadly sins in just one day, of which both of them are dating low class similar to him? And wait, how can B just date a hellhound? I understand Aussie and Fizz since their relationship is at least somewhat private, but Vortex and B are pretty public. How come they are not laughed like Blizz and Stolas? Okay, that doesn't matter, maybe I am thinking too much about this and we will get explanation somewhere in the future and I will look like a stupido. 5 out of 10. Next.
We're here to remind you about possibly life's greatest joy of all, money.
This is the first time in Has Been Hotel Cinematic Universe when we actually see heaven. That's cool. Anyway, Episode 4 is the Cherub episode, which I weirdly feel like is somehow both underrated and not very good. The plot revolves around the old inventor that built age-reversing machine, but when testing he accidentally set it to aging, made himself old, and then decided to kill himself because he doesn't want to be old. But then the Cherubs show up and have kind of funny back and forth with IMP that are obviously trying to support the old gentleman in his suicidal antics. This episode really reminds me of those old Bugs Bunny or Tom and Jerry cartoons in its simplicity and cartoonish nonsense, with all the dumb action and cross-dressing for no reason, which I really don't know what I was on while making notes while watching this episode, but my good things section literally says Blonde Millie hot. So I guess it has to be true. It also says climax, which I'm going to assume doesn't relate to Millie, but yeah, the climax of the episode was actually really good, funny and full of action. When it comes to things I didn't like, the most obvious issue for me in this episode are plot holes. I usually don't mind when story has some things that are not fully thought out, but here, like, this guy built a machine to reduce aging. Why doesn't he just use it on himself? It is his machine. Why doesn't IMP just shoot the guy? They have the order to kill him, but when the angels show up, they kind of just stop trying to do this and instead are trying to convince him to kill himself, despite being ready to kill him just seconds prior. Similarly, why don't cherubs just teleport somewhere where IMP cannot reach them? Like, we see they can teleport, even with a guy, and these bitches from hell are clearly trying to kill this man. The other thing that might not be as bad depending on who you ask, but I personally really don't like it, is use of memes. Like, we have the guy at the beginning calling Luna furry, then later Moxie tells Old Man to come and die, and even later we literally get gnomed? Do you even remember that meme? Like, it's 15 years old, why did you put this in the episode? Someone had to animate this and get paid for it, why? 6 out of 10, pretty good, but has a lot of issues holding it back. Episode 1, Murder Family, is a pretty standard episode. I remember watching it when it first came out and thinking, wow, that was it. But later, I kind of learned to appreciate its simplicity and I actually kind of like it now. It does a really good job explaining the concept and characters to the point where I feel like we don't even need a pilot anymore, as this is obviously superior first episode. But now to the actual plot. It is nothing special, just IMP getting an order on seemingly innocent mom that after a failed attempt on her life shows her true colors. Despite the very simple premise, this episode has absolutely banging atmosphere that just echoes through your mind every time IMP gets a little closer to being overpowered. It shows right off the bat that imps are not just some invulnerable beings and really can be hurt, making every next trip to human realm at least somewhat dangerous and risky. The only real issue I have with this episode are a few kind of awkwardly written lines like this.
Now let's go lick some ass!
The expression is kick some ass. Blitz.
Mine's better.
Like, what does this mostly nonsensical line add to the episode? A few smaller issues would also include the family basically destroying part of their home for no reason, and husband kind of bailing after they shot his wife despite still being armed and having 3 little devils right in front of him. But these are simply just nitpicks that clearly exist just to build an atmosphere further. 7 out of 10, pretty good episode.
Millie, I am not above hitting a female in front of her daddy.
The Harvest Moon Festival is the one episode in this season I never had much strong opinions on. I thought it was good when it came out and that didn't change with passing time. One thing that this episode does exceptionally well is the villain. Striker is just so intimidating and great villain that works as a rival to both Blitz and Moxie, while being absolute menace, and since he is also sort of a twist villain, we get to see his charming usual personality even before we reveal that he is actually big evil of the episode. And I'm usually the one who absolutely hates twist villains, because I feel like secretly evil characters just don't have enough time to shine and instead are basing themselves on how smart a twist is. But this is not at all case with Stryker, and even I, as a twist villain hating enthusiast, can appreciate the character. Also, the way he gets under Blitz's skin without hesitation, identifying his insecurities, is just such a great scene. Wow, Stryker really has it all. I really hope the next time we see him, he will be just as well written and intimidating as he is now. Anyway, beside of the BBEG, I actually really like the setting, and it is kind of sweet that we get to see Millie's family, even if they are not so sweet to Moxie. Also, the reoccurring joke of Shark always getting Moxie is way funnier than it has any right to be. The only things I can actually say I disliked were the fact that song doesn't really advance the plot, and also Millie was weirdly absent. I understand that Helluva Boss is clearly centered more around Blitz and Moxie, but for fuck's sake, this is the episode during which we visit her family. But despite that, it's still best episode so far. Yeah, that's literally how this list works. I'm giving it 8 out of 10.
Is she blind? Suffering some form of brain damage?
Spring Broken is the episode I kind of don't have much to say about. Well, it is the 3rd episode in the series and it is pretty funny. And that is pretty much my review. But for the spirit of this video, I will try to say a little more. The plot revolves around Verasika, Blitz's succubus pop star ex, who stole IMP's parking spot, and therefore Blitz challenges her to demon duel, winner of which can keep the parking spot. The rules are pretty simple. IMP will get point for each kill they have, and Verasika's team will get point for each person they can fuck. The biggest selling point of this episode is Luna though, which is for the first time going along IMP to human realm, where we do find out some things about her relationship with Blitz. Other very good scene I want to mention is the fight with Fish. Millie is such a badass in this episode, and even though I kind of like Drunk Moxie way less than a lot of people seem to, he still has some very funny moments, especially when he gets paired with Millie. The only problem I have with this episode is the fact that the fish fight comes across kind of out of nowhere. I would very much like if the effects of Verasika's drink were shown earlier than it was relevant to the story, just to show us that whatever the fuck is Verasika drinking can transform shit first, like maybe she accidentally spills some on the bug earlier and the bug grows demon teeth or something, I don't know. Also, when I was watching this episode for the first time, I remember thinking that Verasika summoned the fish on purpose in order to sabotage IMP, which I know doesn't really make sense, but come on, neither does her throwing flask just randomly. Also, why the hell does Millie just casually toss Verasika their only evidence of her being there, while literally blackmailing her? 8 out of 10, I still don't get the HR joke. Someone please explain, I'm very desperate.
What are you?
I'm a Virgo.
I remember waiting so long for this episode. Like, the first 5 episodes came, all things considered, pretty quickly. Like almost one per month. But the 6th one kept me waiting for months and months until it finally came out, and OMG, was it worth the wait. Truth Seekers might not be the most high production value episode of Helluva Boss now, but it sure felt like it when it came out. All the action is animated flawlessly, this whole big ass building filled with grunts has so much personality and atmosphere, and it is just so great. But as I said, compared to other episodes, especially from the 2nd season, this is really not anything too unusual now. Well, what does this episode have then? Simple. Really good humor, great premise, and such a memorable song number. Basically, Blitz and Moxie get caught by the weird agent conspiracy guys, while Millie and Luna are trying to rescue them. Obviously, I already praised this episode for its action scenes, but I need to at least tell you once more how I love the different bell styles each member of IMP has. Moxie is a gun expert, while Millie is more of a close range warrior, using knives and axes. Luna will pretty simply eat you, and Blitz is On a first glance, combination of all three, using guns, bats and teeth, based on what he sees fit for the situation. But I also see him kind of like a support character, focusing more on his friends than actual enemies. I can imagine them playing Overwatch together is what I'm saying. But before all the action in the episode, we actually have to, quote, get through rest of the episode. We get a lot of very exciting scenes of Moxie and Blitz fucking with agents and Luna and Millie working as pair, which works really great. But the peak of this episode is definitely the song Moxie's Bad Trip. Visuals during the musical number are absolutely outstanding, both in Moxie and Blitz's sections. Sadly, I have also a few problems that keep this episode from being the masterpiece it would like to be. Firstly, the song is really good, but I sort of don't like that Blitz is the only one that is called out for his behavior. I mean, out of the duo, Blitz is definitely the one that is more in need of change, but the song kind of suggests that Moxie doesn't have to change at all. I mean, the song calls out Blitz for all sort of shit, from how is he treating others, through doubts about his intelligence, to his feelings about Stolas. While the only negative thing it ever mentions about Moxie is that he is apparently bad at speaking his mind. Which I would argue is not even true, since he constantly defies Blitz if he is making a bad call. I don't want to go fully to the Moxie's issues that could be called out for, since this video is already pretty long and this episode is barely about that. It just seems weird that a song called Moxie's Bad Trip is mostly about Blitz. The other thing I did not like in this episode is that the Luna Millie scenes, although good, just seem kind of random, especially the one when they are guessing the code. Like, the scene appears kind of out of nowhere, has a one joke and then ends. I don't know if this is necessarily a bad thing, but it feels so weird. But except these two little things that you probably didn't even notice on your first watching, is this episode really great, and considering time when it came out, pretty revolutionary for the series. 9 out of 10.
You singing love songs in my lustful lounge.
Aussies ain't the place for sentimental sounds.
Now we are getting into two best episodes. And the worst best episode in the series is, in my opinion, episode 7, Aussies. This episode explores pretty much all relationships in the series so far. Well, except for Luna, but she has pretty much the next episode dedicated to her, so it's okay. In this episode, Moxie invites Millie to Aussies and Blitz decides to do a Blitz moment and go to spy on them. But since the club is for couples only, he calls unsuspecting Stolas to go with him. Firstly, I think this episode is such a great summary of the entire first season, to the point where it is considered being season finale more often than actual season finale itself. I also really like songs and little details you probably didn't even notice on the first watching, like this guy is for sure getting his pickle picked. Ozzy and Fizz are absolutely adorable and no one can tell me otherwise. I also really like how they are not necessarily evil, even in the episode where they are both antagonists. They don't kick Moxie out for having song that they deem unfitting, they just encourage him to sing something else, and even show him how. And then at the end, after Millie smashes Fizz with the guitar, they just send them away. Like, Asmodeus is one of the deadly sins, and Fizzaroli is also very important. They could for sure just get away with killing them. But the best part about this episode is definitely the romance stuff. And by romance stuff, I mean that everything goes to shit. Blitz just majorly fucked up in this episode by basically using Stolas, but what I really like about this episode is that it doesn't pretend like the incident is entirely Blitz's fault, since he technically screwed up only because he tried to defend Eminem in, you know, his own special way.
Hey now, I've watched those two pork many times.
And also Stolas is not innocent either, since he doesn't try to defend Blitz and even tries to hide when Ozzy is talking to him. Not even talking about the fact that their relationship is kind of based on him using Blitz for sex as a reward, for simply letting him use a book whenever he himself doesn't actually need it. So can you even blame Blitz for thinking of them as nothing else than just transsexual fucking? It is really sad and just so hard to watch, since you really want them to be happy. It really hurts when you must watch them sabotage their own relationship through no fault than their own. This episode just gives me such strong BoJack Horseman vibes, since both of these shows seem to understand pain of being always just step away from your happy ending, but still managing to screw up everything you want, seemingly just because you can handle being happy. I will probably talk about our funny horse from horsing around some other time, but for now just know that if I'm talking about something in the same mindset as our Lord and Savior BoJack Horseman, it must mean it is really fucking good. Fuck this. In my notes I have written 9 out of 10, but I think I just talked myself into giving this episode perfect score. 10 out of 10.
It always seems more quiet in the dark.
I really love this episode. The premise is very simple. Stolas wants to get away from his wife that is mad at him for cheating, so he takes his daughter semi against her will to Lululand, while he hires IMP as their bodyguards. The first really good thing I need to mention are the songs. And yes, I said song, since despite most episodes having only one song, maybe 2 if you are lucky, this episode has 3 songs and all of them are amazing. The weakest song being Lululand. It is just a fun little jingle Rolleybot sings at the park. Despite being comparatively not as good, it is still very iconic and quotable. Second best song is The World is Burning Around Me, which is not sung by a character, but is still pretty effective to set tone of what Octavia is feeling at the beginning of the episode. Also, it absolutely slaps, and I would be lying if I said that I never listened to it, just for fun, even out of context of the series. But it is not even close to the best song in the episode, and maybe even the best song in the entire season. You Will Be Okay. It is on the complete start of the episode that is set in a past where Octavia was just a child and Stolas was still successfully pretending to be happy. I don't even want to talk about the song since I don't believe I can do it justice, so just listen.
And when creation goes to die, you can find me in the sky upon the lost day.
Visuals are perfect, and everything about it just perfectly demonstrates what is Stolas losing by betraying his family. And the thing I really like about this episode is that Stolas, despite hurting Octavia, is still clearly trying to be a good parent, which makes it even sadder. He tries to make friendly conversations about topics his daughter seems to be interested in, and ignores the one she seems to be put off by.
What's that you're listening to?
Do you even know how many virgins I would sacrifice for my parents to ask me what I am listening to? But the best scene in the whole episode is in the end. Stolas actually owns to his mistakes and apologizes to Octavia. Do you know how easy would it be for him to just blame the whole situation on Stella? But he understands that despite that he was not only one who failed their marriage, he still holds a responsibility for his daughter. Since it might be morally grey to cheat on someone who treats you like trash and who you've been forced to marry in the first place, but the impact he left on his child, the only thing about his married life that he really loved, is undeniable and it's just so powerful to see parent, nonetheless the high-ranking individual, admit he was wrong. I promise I like other things about this episode as well, like action scenes with Blitz and RoboFizz, or Millie and Moxie and stuff, despite the fact that the second half of their story is pretty much just ripped off from the one scene from Despicable Me, but it was done pretty self-aware, and it is pretty inoffensive at worst, so yeah. But the Octavia and Stola stuff is just my favorite stuff from the entire season, and it is why I believe that it is actually the best episode from this amazing season of a show. And that's it. I ranked all 9 episodes that can be considered as season 1 of Helluva Boss. I really like this show. What more can I say? Despite some episodes ranking pretty low, I think that they are still great achievements, considering that they were basically all made from visions of one person. Although the first few episodes felt like a kind of amateur animated YouTube show, reminiscent of things like Edward, it quickly picked up the pace to the point where the newest episodes seem very professional, made with just a little bit of that indie charm for good luck. It is just amazing how far this show went, from something that looked just like a little project made to entertain us before Has-Been Hotel comes out, to a great show with multi-seasonal arcs and emotional moments that hit. I guess you could say that Vivzy Pop is one hell of a boss. For what I will give this first season of the show, I will give it a ranking of 8 out of 10. I know a lot of you might not fully agree with me, so feel free to write your own order in the comments, since it will boost my algorithm. I mean, it will help me understand my ever so slightly growing audience. Don't forget that we are just a teeny tiny bit from overtaking the Jesus in the number of followers, so if you want to add yourself to our very cool army, maybe subscribe or like or both.
Please, I'm very desperate.
Bingo!